Hello everybody, Waldosis here, bringing you a very special episode of Maker Machinations for your daily dose of death traps in collaboration with Behaviour. Now, if you haven't seen my content before, as mentioned, my name is Waldosis. I create content for things like Meet Your Maker, as well as other games that have a more villainous perspective. In particular, I stream over on twitch.tv/Waldosis every Monday, Tuesday, Friday and Saturday, streaming primarily horror games and games from a villain's perspective. I also create content over on YouTube at youtube.com/@WaldosisVT, where you can catch more curated content such as tutorial videos, as well as compilations from those streams. And today, we're going to be taking over my demonic edge and going and building a gothic fortress in Meet Your Maker. Now, if you haven't seen Meet Your Maker before, it is a great game where you can take on the point of view of a raider taking on an outpost, or take the view of a builder where you actually build up your own outpost for people to go and raid. And there's a few things that we need to consider when we're building these bases, and as we go through this process, I'm going to cover all the different things that you need to know to get the best out of your first outpost, or to bring up your building skill if you're someone who is just starting out and wants to improve what they can build. So let's start off with the very basics. This is a brand new outpost plot, and I've actually picked the biggest plot type that you can pick at 4,500 capacity, which is going to give us a load of building room. Now, there's a few things that we want to make sure that we are aware of their position before we even start building, because the whole purpose of building a base in this game is to get someone to work from the start to finish following the path of this little dude here called Harvey. Harvey basically will guide the shortest possible path between the start location over here and this tile up here, which is known as the gen mat. So we need to make sure that there's a valid path for Harvey to walk from that entrance through to this gen mat. On the map, we'll also see items known as tombs, and there's actually one around here. If I just come around this side here, this here is a tomb, and these have the ability to drop additional drops for players when they actually find them and destroy them. So normally it's good practice to make sure that you include the ability to get to these tombs in your outposts. And there's actually 3 on this map. One here. There is one over here. If I just come around and find it, it is just over this section here and down underneath. It's down here somewhere. Just going to try and find it because it's in a bit of a weird place, but I do need to make sure that I'm connecting up to it. I'm pretty sure it's around this section here. There it is, tucked away in the background. There's also a third one on the map. I'm trying to remember where it is. I believe it's just over this side here. Let me just come around and find it. We're not going to worry about that too much because we will be coming back to it a little bit later on. But I can hear it going. Whereabouts is it? There it is. That's the one that we saw earlier. There is another one around here, but we'll come back to that at a later time. Like I said, I know it's around here somewhere, so we'll pick that up in a second. But for now, let's start building out an outpost. And the first thing that I like to do is get a path that goes from my gem mat through where I want the players to travel, and then over to the Harvey entrance. So I'll be starting off by building this up as a tower over here, because I want to do this, like I said, gothic castle. So we'll build a tower up and have a bit of a stand above this area here. Then what I'm going to do is build down to that outpost area over here for that little tomb. I will find the other one as I'm going along as well and get that one built in. And then we'll also build down to that one at the bottom here. On top of that, I want to build up a little bit of like a throne room type area, because this is going to be a castle. Let's start off by getting our tower built. If I press the tab key, I'll get a series of different blocks that I can use, and I'm going to build the whole base in concrete blocks and then change a few out with some decorations later on. Let's get our concrete block selected and start building out. And the first thing I'm going to do is get this little platform here built into a little entrance someone can come to and actually get that gen mat. And I always like to build starting from the gen mat and working my way out. You can see here I can move the blocks around to get different shapes. I'm just going to get a little circular platform that this one can be brought up to, like this here. I'm then going to get my ramp coming down out of this so that we can start building up the path that the player is going to take. And let's just get a little walkway coming down. I like to use longer walkways for traps because they are very, very fun in terms of catching people up as they come down the pathway. So let's build this down until we reach this little platform just down here. You can see I'm just building up blocks to get this to the right place. And we'll get one here, and take out the back blocks here, because we want to save our capacity, which is this value up the top corner in the right, for us to be able to get down to. You can see here this is actually taking me above that tomb. So I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting by changing this block out here. So it's just above there, and we have a little drop down here that's going to come down to this little tomb area. I'm just going to pop a little platform underneath it and seal it in using these blocks. So we have a little sort of enclosed area that they can drop into to get that tomb. And we'll turn this into more of a danger area in a moment. But we'll create a little pathway there. So there's going to be two paths they're taking here. The first one's going to go up into the gen mat. The second one is going to drop down into that tomb. So that's a good starter pathway, but let's carry on getting this built. So now we have a rather large open space. So I want to build something here to actually enclose the player in. So let's create our throne room here. And to do this, I'm going to drag and drop to create larger structures really quickly. So let's build out a wide-ish room. We want this to be about 5 tiles wide. Now you'll notice that as I'm building this, there are certain blocks that already exist I can't remove. This is called bedrock, and the bedrock basically stops you from building in that area. But there is a trap that you can use that disguises itself as bedrock, which we'll use in a moment to trap this little entranceway here. But that looks like a nice width for that starter room. So let's now build up from here and get something a bit wider. So I'm going to put a block in here so I can start getting these outside walls in. And let's do the same here as well. Actually, we can build across straight from there, like that. Just take that corner out there. And we have the start of our room. And we'll block off this entranceway here as well. Again, I'm making sure to only block off the walls I actually need to block off to save myself some capacity so that when I'm building this up a bit later on and getting something a bit more deadly, I'm not running out of capacity. So there is my starter room. Now, let's have a look around and see if we can find that other tomb. So I completely forgot where it is. So we've got the one that's below us down here, which we've got to drop into, which was just around this section here. I can hear it, but I can't see it. Where are we? Here we are. It's in this little block area here. What I'm going to do, just to make sure I have an indication as to where that is, I'm just going to put a little pillar coming up from it to indicate where it is so I can come back to it easier later on. We have our one at the back. I'm sure there was another one. Whereabouts are we? Let's have a look. Now I'm just going to turn my ambient volume up because I should be able to hear it a bit better if I have that a little bit higher. Because actually, if I go to the one over here, you'll hear they make a very distinct sound when you're close to them. Let's see if we can scout out the other one. I'm pretty sure it was up the top here somewhere. Ah, there we are. There is our other one here that we want to make sure we're coming down to. So let's put a block here so we know it's there. And actually, it's right next to the gen map. So we can actually build this in as part of our tower. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little bit of a tower that comes up to this section. So let's bring this down here. Actually, let's take that one out. And let's build it up from the side here. This actually goes right down to the side of our section there. So what we can actually do is we can build this up to create a drop section that's going to drop straight the way down onto that tomb, like this here. We want to make sure that this looks right with our tower, so let's build this into the shape of this tower here. So let's spin these tiles round and get something that looks like it's actually meant to be here. Like that there. And we'll just block off the top section here by swiveling that round like that. But you're not going to see that from the direction you're coming. So we've got something that looks like it's part of this tower, but we'll smooth all this into the edges here with some triangular blocks. Like that there. You can see here we have a nice little drop area here that drops you straight the way down to that tomb. Here we are. Okay, I'm just going to drop my ambient volume down just a little bit more again, because that can get a little bit loud when you're going around and building. So I like to drop it down to about 20% or 30% here, just to get it that little bit clearer. There we go. Okay, so let's complete this tower up in a second, but let's get the rest of our structure in first. So we have our walls here, I want to actually make these walls a bit higher, because I'm going to actually put a little guard path around the top of it. Let me just structure this up a bit higher. So again, we're just building these walls up using this drag and drop feature, which makes it nice and quick to be able to get those structures in place. We're just building out these walls, fleshing out our outpost to get this looking nice and cool. So let's spread this out a bit further. We'll go up to this floor here. I think we don't need to go any higher than this. This will probably be wasting capacity if we go any higher than this. There we go. Because what I want to do is I want to place a walkway that goes around the top here for my guards to walk along. Like this here. That should look nice. So when you come into this room, there are going to be guards all the way around the top that will trigger as we go into here. And what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to place a couple of columns here just to give that a more interesting look to it. And we can hide a few traps behind those as well. So this gives you a nice little defensive room. And we're going to come through and style this a bit more in a few minutes. But that works as a little basic structure. So now what do we want to do next? Well, we want to come down to where our tomb is down here to include that one in. But we've got loads of capacity and we've got loads of space as well over here. So I'm actually going to create this pathway that's going to come down from this section here. Let's get the right positioning. And let's use some of that area to the side of us. So again, I'm just cleaning up the blocks behind them just so I've got something a bit clearer. We'll actually bring this over here and we'll do another trap room at this side here. So again, we've got plenty of room that we want to use. So let's create some danger blocks. I'm going to put a lower block there. You'll see the reason for why in a few minutes. But let's just structure this little tiny room out here. This is again a much smaller room, but it'll work for the time being for what we're looking for. And I'm going to put a wall on it like this here, bringing it onto this bedrock over here. I'm going to structure this going down here. So we're coming down a bit further down towards where our tomb block is, which is just over here. So we're kind of working our way down. Let's have a look where we can also come down over here. So we want to come down that block there. And also here. And again, we're working our way down. So we'll come down here as well. And there. And then we'll come down here and start building more of a structure around here. So let's start blocking this off so we've got a section that you can see but you can't get into from that area. So we want to block this off a little bit more so you can't get out the sides of these ramps. And again, we're going to go through and seal all this off later on. But for now, we're just going to seal the blocks in the basic floor. And the reason I've left that trap there, I'm going to turn that into a hollow block trap. We then want to close this section in. So we'll actually just follow that along there like that. And we're using as much of the bedrock as we can to save ourselves some capacity. So again, we're going to just close a load of this section off. Again, making sure to only use the capacity that we need, so that we're not worrying too much about blocking things in. We're just structuring something that's going to be a bit more interesting for someone to run through. Like this here. Okie dokie, so let's pull this around the corner. And start blocking in this area here. Do we need this one here? Let's have a quick look. Yes, we do, because it doesn't block that fully, so we can block that in. There we go. So we're just blocking down this pathway, and we want to get down into here, so let's, again, carry on blocking this off. So now we're getting pretty close to where this tomb is, because it drops in over here. So let's fill that in, block this little block off here. And then we'll close that off there, so we're going to put a trap here as well. And that's where the tomb is down there, so we want to make sure we've got a drop down into here. We don't need to connect this to the Harvey path, so I think that's actually okay as it is. So let's just block it in the top here. And we'll actually curve that ceiling here like this to get ourselves something a bit more interesting shape-wise. And we will block this off there. The reason why I'm doing that is we can put a trap on that wall there, so that when you're coming around, it gets them as they come to this corner. We want to block that off here and there. Like that. Again, we're blocking off all the entrances, so this is a nice enclosed corridor. And we'll put one here as well, just so it's going straight to the right area. And it's dumping you down to the tomb. So that's our pathing for that tomb. Now, what we also need to do is we need to make sure that we're connecting up to that path over here. So let's create another hallway that leads to that. So let's actually create a pathway that goes from the little section here, which is connected up to the pathway. Let's just find the best place. So we can actually work off this block here. So I can take out that little divider there, because that's no longer needed. Can I get into it from here as well? Yes, I can. So I need to block that in. So we need to put a block there, and that's now blocked in. Perfect. So we can either come from this little room here if we wanted to, or we could come over from this section here. We could go down and then back up again. There's loads of different routes that we can take, but I want to make something that's going to utilise one of the new traps that came with Dreadshore, which is a laser that bounces off certain surfaces. So I want to create something that's got more of a curved pathway. So I think I'm going to actually have it come in from here. So there's two paths that people can take. One this way down to the tomb, and one that goes up into the actual main structure. And I think I'm going to take this going down into where the bedrock is. The reason behind that is that if you're building around bedrock, there's a trap called the hollow trap. And the hollow trap basically disguises itself as a bedrock cube. If you're too high up in the air, it's really hard to disguise the fact that you're using them, because bedrock isn't that high up. So by coming down to where the bedrock is, we can make it much more feasible. There'll be a trap there. Okay, we now need to have a block here that you're going to walk onto. And I'm going to create a little curved pathway. So let's get these at the right angle, like this here, and we'll start from this far side, building out something that's going to be walkable. So it would be like this, and like, if we get it the right way around, and we want one on the back here, so there's going to be kind of an angled hallway here. That's going to go back this way to connect over here. Again, we're going to block this in. That hallway now is going to curve around there to give us a little bit more danger, because we're going to bounce some items off the walls here. And I'll show you kind of how we're going to close the walls in as well, using these cubes like this to close in this pathway. So now we have an irregular shape here that can be used to bounce those lasers off. So you're going to come down this ramp. Let's just close off the ramp as well to make sure that we don't end up in this scenario whereby they can get in from the side. Here we go. That's going to need to be an angled wall, like that. And we can actually close this off from the outside wall, so we haven't got to worry about them closing off the ramp. We want that to be a bit higher. Double press space, so I dropped out of flight mode. Let's just seal this into that wall there. And then we're going to continue building our blocks up. And as we come down this ramp here, we want to make sure this section here is also closed off. So we'll put that like this here. And then we should have space then to put a block here. So now let's just test to see what that looks like. Let's drop out of flight mode. Come down here. And yeah, we have a nice little curved little corridor here. That's going to be quite dangerous. Okay, so now let's build a bit further out. We're actually coming up to the top of the wall here that we used for that bottom section. So we can actually use the top of that wall as a walkway. Because if we close this off here and do that kind of structure, we have a walkway that we can use here. Because it only needs to be sealed here, like that, so that you don't see it from this angle. So we actually need to take that wall out like that, and that will be much more So you can see we can't get into it from here, but from the outside now we're using that same structure as the walkway. Where are we? I've lost where I was. We come down out of here. Yep, here we go. We're using that structure as the walkway. So now let's build this out a bit further, and I'm going to start bringing this now to the HRV path. Spin that round. And in we go. So now we actually have a valid path. That's going to take us straight the way through to our gen map up in the tower at the far side. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start stylizing this a little bit more and giving us a nice castle is I'm going to start blocking off these entrances so that there's no way of getting in without going through a certain path. Now the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to stylize this entrance and make it a little bit like a castle by adding in a moat, and I'm going to use a moat of lava to make it nice and interesting. So let's get that set up here. So I'm just taking a few cubes here and creating this structure that you're going to enter through. And there are different cubes that you can use for different effects. So one of the things I want to use here is the cage glass block, so you have a bit of an entranceway. I'm going to raise it a bit higher just so it's a bit more stylish. Like this. And put some curved walls in to create this kind of entrance gate. So that looks nice and interesting. So what we'll do then is we'll also add in a bit of a trap with these corrosive cubes which look a bit like lava, which we can use to make a interesting looking entrance. So let's just use these to create this little mini moat type structure. It's not going to go very far out, but it's going to look nice and interesting from the initial appearance, which you're going to come over here and you've got a castle with a moat. We now need to start sealing off those walls, so let me just jump back into my concrete blocks and start sealing off these entrances. And that noise you heard there is I just happened to catch the Harvey path in one of these blocks, so that sound was to let you know that that path is no longer valid, because we need to keep that valid path to be able to successfully traverse it. Now block that off. Let's see how this looks as we come in from the actual direction we're going to be travelling. Here we go. And we have a nice long hallway here that we can add some traps to if we wanted to, but I'm actually going to probably not take that far back. Let's just have a look how it looks from the outside. I don't think I actually need to go that far back, so I can save myself some capacity here by just dropping these out. And we'll close it off here just on the corner. Again, we're just saving ourselves a little bit of capacity where we can, because you want to make sure that we have enough for some nice traps later on. So again, let's come in from this entrance and see how we look. So actually, those corrosive cubes I think are a bit low, so let's bring them up, because they don't look quite as interesting because they're a bit too embedded into the ground. So let's bring those back up, grab some more corrosive cubes and put them in layer like this here, and actually funnel someone into a little path here, so we could probably double trap this if we need to. I don't think it needs to be one higher actually, I think it needs to just go out one further. Like this here. That is much more interesting. Then you go down into here. We actually have these here, so if someone stepped to the side, they would get set on fire. So we can actually set a trap here to actually catch people out. And I'm going to use one of my favourite traps here, which causes people to kind of panic run in different directions. And that is bombs. So let's trap the bomb dispenser. If I place this here, what will happen if I go into test mode, which I can do by pressing escape and then T, is it will load me into my base, and I can see what it looks like from a raider's perspective. So I walk here, the second I walk through, that triggers, and that entire area gets bombed. Now this is also going to be very useful because the HRV will actually follow the path here. So if they accidentally, and I say accidentally with, not meaning accidentally really, is that you can basically kill them off and hide the path that players have got to traverse, making it much more difficult for them to be able to find their way around. Okie dokie, so that works quite well. So next we have this section here, and I want to make this one really deadly, and I'm going to use some curved walls and use the new trap which is a laser that tracks you and bounces off surfaces to make this really tricky to traverse. So I'm going to put another curved wall. Actually, I'm going to curve the wall going in, so they actually have to go into this little curved pathway. So let's put that like that. So we've got some bounces that are going to happen in these different directions. And we'll have one here that we're going to place going the opposite way. Let's get the right positioning, like that. And we're going to put some blocks here just to close off those drops. That's a nice, more interesting shape. And then we'll close this area off with some straight blocks. Let's just close off the tops of these. So you have, again, more of an interesting path, because one of the biggest tricks with this game is to make sure that your pathways aren't following just a straight line. It's a big mistake that builders start making when they first start playing the game, is they use a lot of claustrophobic straight corridors, which are great for kind of getting the idea, but these irregular shapes make things much more interesting when you start using some of the more detailed traps. For example, if I put another block in here, and then we'll curve the bottom of this out just so that it's blocked off, what we can actually do here is we can put a laser that's going to bounce off here and bounce all the way around this corridor. And I love this new trap, so let's place a few of those in here. It's called a sentry beam. So we'll pop one in here and one in here. And if we just test that again, if you just load, what this does is I walk into here, as you can see, that's going to bounce right the way around this corridor, which is particularly troublesome. And if I destroy this, other ones are going to continue to bounce. But if their lasers bounce into themselves, they will self-destruct, so you've got to be a bit careful how you position that. But that is a nice little starter point. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place another one. And I think I'm going to place it so that it comes from the back of you here. So we've got a few different ways of those triggering. Now, there is something in this game that is quite common where players will kind of run through. So what kind of happens is that they'll try and escape by just running straight through that corridor into this area here. So I want to make sure that these are bouncing into that hallway, and that one that's facing backwards will actually get into this pathway. Now what I also want to do is make sure that people running through here have a few interesting hazards. And you can see we've got some bedrock here. Now, if I place bedrock, it's going to break the path that this Harvey Walker can walk through, because you can't walk over a holographic cube. So normally this kind of trap would be great in this little section here where you have bedrock, but it's not going to work very well for what we're looking at. But a few more sentry traps down here are going to be really interesting, but I want to do something with this corridor here. So what can I do here? Well, I can use more bombs, or I can use some pistons to make this just a bit of a slower pathway. And I think that's going to work really well, again, running it into this corridor away from those sentry guns. So let's just place a couple of traps here, which are going to be pistons closing and opening. I'm then going to place another sentry beam here. So they'll fire into this curved corridor as people come around, and then one on here as well. This is going to be quite nice for just catching people as they run around here, and those will slow them down just that little bit. I'm then going to place over here. Actually, no, I'm not, because it'll break the pathway, so let me just place that block back down. Apparently I'm blocking the pathway anyway. Where is the path getting blocked? Let's have a look. Ah, yes, that was a blocked floor here, so let's place that block back in. That was one that went up to the upper floor. Like that. Now, I can make this even more interesting by placing some of these dragon teeth in, but I'm not going to quite get them into this structure, it's a bit too thin. But I might be able to do it in this little section here. So let's have a look. Because Harvey can actually walk over these if they're in a certain orientation. Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to get them in, so let's scrap that idea for the time being and carry on looking at this hallway. So I like the idea of using something in here as well to force players when they get to this ramp to get caught out. So let's have a look at putting in one of my favourite trap structures, which is basically going to fire down that ramp with this little pathway here. And for this, I'm going to use my bolt shot. Now, if you hover over a trap and press the Y key, it'll show you where that trap is going to trigger. So that means that as soon as someone walks around this corner onto this tile here, it's going to trigger that bolt trap to fire down, which should be good at catching people out as they come onto this ramp. And I'm also going to set up one of my favourite combinations here by placing a guard on this trap. Now, some may say, well, isn't the trap going to hit the guard? And that's exactly right. But in Meat Maker, you also can press F to add modifications to your guards. And in the case of this warmonger I've placed here, I'm going to place a dead man switch. What this will mean is that when this guard dies, they'll explode. So as the person walks around this section here, getting away from these sentry beams, and they come into this area here, that trap will trigger. They'll back off around here to get away from the firing bolts, but then the guard will slide down the ramp and be deposited in the section at the bottom here, exploding and hopefully killing the raider. So let's close this corridor off now and build this into the rest of the structure. So we'll build in our square walls here just to close this off. And again, we want to enclose this corridor to make sure that you can't get into it from any way apart from the way that we're intending. Like this here. Now, I like the idea of turning this little structure here into a little kind of tower to give ourselves a castle-y feel. So let's just close off this pathway here and start building our first tower of this castle. So let's close off this pathway here. We need another one just to close off the ceiling here. Like this. And let's start getting our tower built on this block here. So to do this, I'm actually going to build a triangle shape. Sorry, not a triangle shape. I'm going to build this kind of plus sign and then put my triangles in to block it out into a circular shape like this here, like I did with the tower up there. And I'm actually going to use these dragon's teeth just to give it a bit of an interesting shape, so it's not just a square platform. I'm then going to get my standard ramps and build this up to be my first tower, like this here. And there we have our basic structure. We just need to use our squares now to fill that block in. And then we're going to turn this into a bit of a turret, so we have a nice looking tower. Like that. And I'm going to make it hollow here, again saving that little bit of capacity. Now when you see castles normally, they come out a bit further at the top, so let's build this out just a little bit further. Like this. And now we want to build our angled walls like this to close this in, and again we're just going to use the bare minimum that we can to save on capacity. Wait, there we go, like that. And like that. So we now have our top section. Again, we'll just seal off the top there, and we're just going to place a little turret structure like this. Something to look, again, keeping it interesting, to give it this kind of gothic fortress look. And if we come out from a distance, you can see here now we have that front of the castle. So that looks a bit more interesting. So let's kind of follow our path now and see where things aren't sealed up until that main room. We're looking for any gaps in our ceiling where someone can get through and sort of sneak their way into the outpost without following the standard path. So here's a good example here, which we can just block off. Carry that around. Can we see any more blocks? Nope, we're fairly fine. We've got a little trap here. We've got a room here that we can set off some traps. And then this drops down into the next section. So we're going to close this off here. Because that kind of goes down to our tomb, if I remember right. Yes, so we need to make sure we're closing off all of these sections. So this needs to be closed off here. So we need to put a block in there like that to close that bit off. We also need to close off the ceilings here. So we can add one here. Again, we're just shutting off any secret ways that people can sneak into our outpost without going through the path that we're intending them to take. There we go. So that comes into this area here. And now you can't sneak out into a different path. There we go. And this is a nice little area that we can trap up, which we'll come back to trapping a bit later on. But for now, that is a nice little closed off area. And coming up into here, we then have our next main room. And I'm going to close off the ceilings on here as well, like we just did, to create ourselves a little enclosed guard room here. And I'm going to use one of my favourite guards in here as well. And let's just close off those ceilings again, save ourselves some capacity. This could be a bit lower. So actually we can put our kind of angle ceiling in here. Let's take this to the top here. Like that. And then we'll come out with our squares here to close these off. I believe this here was the tomb. Yes, so we need to actually have that valid. So this path led up to there. That one we can leave out like that. So that goes to the tomb. He says. Yes, it does. So we'll put another ramp in here. And again, we're going to be trapping this up a bit later on. But for now, we're just making sure that we have all of our paths in place. And I always like to start by getting the paths in place, because it does make things a lot easier when you come through to trapping, because you can kind of look at where players will need to travel rather than kind of just guesswork. Okay, now we have our ramp going down to here. I'm going to block that off for a second so I can get an angled ceiling. And then we want to make sure that we're closing off these pathways. So again, we're closing these off like this to create a nice angled ceiling. Like this into this section. So that's got a nice little angled pathway. And again, we've got that nice angle so that when we come into here, the trap on here can see you from the bottom. Okay, let's now create the side of this pathway. And again, I'm going to use square blocks like this, just to block out the general pathway, like this, leading up to the top. But I'm going to put the curve wall in here because we want to start making this fit our positioning. So again, we're just looking here at building up a structure that covers most of this pathway up, and we're going to make this look a little bit prettier as we go along. But for now, we're just doing this little structure here, like that. And here we are. So now I'm going to close these angles off by making them look a little bit more interesting with these angles to cover those blocks here on the side. And I'm going to place in an angled wall here just to block off that section. Again, we're just putting our walls in here. Have our section in here. And that's a bit more interesting. Let's make this aesthetically nicer from the outside by just putting the angled wall in here so it looks a bit more interesting going up into the tower. Now what we're going to do is we're going to close this tower off. And we're going to actually build it up very similar to that one that we built the other side, but with this little interesting little pathway here, and we'll figure out how we're doing this as we go along. So let's get our walls going along the side here, like this. And then we're going to have some square walls on the outside of here. Again, saving capacity. So that's kind of how our tower's going to look. So again, we've got a nice little area here that we could use some of those lasers to bounce around. But I think that works well as a basic tower. So let's actually see how we construct this a bit better. It's too wide all the way around. So if we pop like that, that is going to be nice and clear. So let's build this up as a 2 wide tower rather than a 1 wide tower. So the previous one we did was 1 wide. Now we're building this one as 2 wide. So this is actually going to be a bit wider than the one over there, but that's fine. And this is going to be a nice feature tower here. Like this. And again, we probably want to build out 1 wider for the end of this structure. Like this here. There we go. And 1 over here. That's going to be what our tower structure is going to look like. So first of all, we want to make this more rounded. So we'll drop these down here like this. Again, we're just making this shape interesting. We'll block that little pathway off there in a second. Again, we're just making this more interesting shape-wise as we go along. Like this. Just giving ourselves a nice, cool-looking tower. Like that. It's a bit of a weird position compared to the wall because of the way that we've had to build it out for the extra platform, but that's fine. And we'll close this little block off here, like that. So now you can't sneak into the gem mat room. So now we're going to go through and just seal these little blocks here that you can sort of pull through. These actually need to be square blocks, or actually we can use the dragon stuff here to angle that in. Okay, it's not going to look perfect, but it'll look more interesting. Like that. And then we want to just add in, we'll use dragon's teeth here just to make this, again, keeping this more interesting. Just to add in our tower sides. Here we go. That's the wrong way. There we go. So again, we got ourselves a little tower. It just looks a bit more interesting, and if you drop into here, go down to that tower. So I do want to seal it off so you can't drop in all the way, because otherwise you'll sneak in to this section here. So we are going to block this off. We'll block this off. There's the gem mat. So we'll just block this off with squares just here. Okie dokie. So as you're coming into here, you'll fall down that pathway. And again, we're just going to put in some angles here just to make it a bit more interesting. Now, I want to set up one of my favourite traps down here. So we've got the tube here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that bottom floor with a hollow block and place an impaler on the bottom. What that's going to do is when you step into here, you'll fall down this pathway and you'll fall straight away through the bedrock at the bottom and get hit by the impaler. Now, actually, I'm going to make this a bit more interesting thinking about it. I'm going to use, instead of an impaler, I'm going to use a bolt shot. Because one of the things that will happen when people hit that scenario is they tend to jump. But there's no direction they can jump out of the way of that bolt trap. So that should be a bit more deadly. So if they don't destroy the trap, they are getting killed. I'm also going to use one of those sentry beams around here as well, so that when people come into the gem mat room, they're going to start getting tracked by these lasers. I'm wondering if here I can actually use an angled wall to make this a bit more tricky. So from here we want to make sure there's a square block there, but I'm actually going to get another curved wall and start changing the shape here, like that. Again with the sentry beam on. There we go. To to start tracking you as you come in. Now, this is one of my favourite structure types. But what I want to do as well is I'm just going to put an incinerator here, just behind that section with a hollow cube, so that when you go and grab the gem mat, you're going to get burned, because that's always fun. Saying that, actually, thinking a bit more carefully about that hollow block's actually not going to do much good, because we're too high really for there to be bedrock. So let's place one of these dragon's teeth to get more interesting bounces. Let's see how that's going to look. I'm not quite convinced on this, but we'll try it out and see how it works. This looks like a fairly interesting room. Actually, if I place the block there just to give that division, it's not going to be working the way I want it to. I think it's better to have it open, actually. Maybe just place something that's a bit more obvious, just like a little catcher. So let's just try a bull shot on that back wall to get you as you come up the ramp and onto that section. Now, one of the things that I like to do with these traps, especially if you've got a kind of way of trapping people, is to create something that you have to force players to slow down with. So, if people are dropping into this section here, they're going to literally be falling onto that trap. Is there anything I can do, however, to catch them in the opposite direction? Well, actually there is. If I place a bolt trap here, just above the trap on this, it should catch them as they fall down. However, if I do that, thinking about it, I'm going to damage the trap at the bottom. So again, it's using your logic as to where the best places for traps are. Again, I'm going to use my trusty bolt trap on that angle. Again, one of my favourite structures. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this one to be a second wave. What that means is that that's going to shoot at people as they leave the gen mat room going down this section here. I also have just discovered I need to close these walls off here because they're not fully closed. So let's get those ones closed off as well while we're here. There we go. Need to do both sides. And then we actually have this section here that still needs to be closed off. So let's get that closed. Like that. And I can see this area here also still needs to be closed. Like that. So I think our core structure is now in place, with the exception of a couple of areas to close off. Here we are. So let's just try running through this from start to finish, just on foot, so we can see if there's any gaps in the structure. Press P, I can hide my preview, so I can just look around like I would if I was coming in as a raider. That has a high ceiling, so that's going to be a good ceiling to trap. Got my little trap here, leads into this room here where you can either go left to go up to the actual path that you need to take, or you can go down here to head towards the tomb. And this is structured fine, there's no ways in or out that's going to sneak up through the pathway. That is perfect, so that is all nice and sealed. Now we are at 1,700 capacity, so we have plenty to play with still. Now we've got our structure in, and I'm just going to create a couple of interesting little traps here. We have a nice little room here we're going to use some guards on. Aha, there are some blocks here that lead outside, so we need to get rid of those. So we'll put a curved one here, block that one off, like that, and we'll put a curved ceiling here, like that, to block this pathway. Like that. That's the kind of thing we're looking for as we do this run through. And I'm pretty sure there's not going to be any up here on the tower, but let's have a look. The tower's looking fine, it's all sealed, and then you drop down here into... Perfect, we have ourselves a basic base structure. So now the fun part, let's start trapping it all. So we've got this little structure here where we've got these pillars. Can we do something here? Well, yes we can. First thing we can do is we can start putting some guards in. So I want to have some guards shooting from this upper level here. But I want to use guards that are going to be able to basically trap that bottom floor as a result. So I'm going to use cannon backs. But looking at this, the angle of visibility is going to be quite low for them. And I can actually check that out by putting the guard down and pressing F to record a patrol. This is going to show where they're looking. So actually, yes, they can see that doorway. I mean, this is perfect. So let's place a couple of these on these shelves, looking at the doorway. Let's get that right this time. We're going to get a few of these on here, because these guards are particularly dangerous. And again, I'm just using the control function by holding F to make sure that they're facing the doorway. There we are. We'll put a couple here as well. Again, we're just making these block that path up, and actually, I think I've just spotted a gap in my ceiling, which I need to fix. These little tiny patrols are really good for getting sure that your guards that can actually see where you need to trap. So that's going to be my first real major trap room. And what I'm actually going to do as well is I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting by placing in a few divides here to put some of those corrosive cubes in. This. So let's put some corrosive cubes in, again making the room more interesting. Now, I want to be careful with these guards because their bombs will actually fall into these corrosive cubes. So again, I'm going to use some mods, and I'm going to place the hardened mod on all of these cubes. This means that the Cannonback's bombs will bounce off these cubes. Now, while that may sound a bit counterintuitive, it's actually going to be really useful because these actual traps are going to essentially have an area where the player can't step on the floor, so they're going to have to walk away from it into other bombs, again making it a little bit more deadly. And this game is all about those little bit extra deadliness that you can add to things. The little tiny things make a huge difference, and that is exactly why I'm placing these sentry beams. So as we come into here, what's going to happen is those two sentry beams, first of all, immediately are going to lock onto you, start firing lasers, while these cannonbacks also start firing bombs down. Now, if you are dodging the cannonbacks, you may step onto lava cubes, getting burnt over by those. Or you may try and retreat through this doorway, in which case the bombs are going to fall down this ramp, making that room particularly dangerous. But what else can we do in here? Well, actually, there is some bedrock on some of these, so we also can trap these sidewalls. So the idea of this particular room is to be as dangerous as possible. So I'm going to cross over some incinerators just behind these two columns, so they can't be seen from when you enter the first room. So again, making it that little bit more deadly. And I'm quite happy with this as a room, actually, but we could do one more thing. So looking at this way we're coming in, these traps are going to be far enough away from this wall to be able to have some more bombs down. These are going to let the bounce bombs off, and these aren't going to be caught out by any bombs that fall in that entranceway. So let us think about how we can structure this. So I'm going to grab my concrete block, and I'm going to place another bit of my walkway here. Actually, I'm only going to do one, and what I'm going to do is put a bomb dispenser here. So players will walk into the room. That bomb dispenser is likely to fall down that hallway. The cannonbacks will then start firing. And actually, if we are a bit clever about this, we can use the concrete block with a dragon's tooth, like this, to make sure that our cannonback bombs, if they fire this way, get bounced into the room accordingly. Like this. So we're kind of making this like a bit like a pinball machine. Actually, I'm going to do another one here actually, that works quite well, having these like this. This is quite an interesting way of doing it. So let's funnel everything into the room. And this is the good thing about this game, is that you can rapidly change your structures based on what you think is going to work. That is actually going to block that view off here, so let's take that off. That's better. So now we have something interesting where we can start funneling bombs into this room. I'm actually pretty happy with how that room's looking so far. I'm going to put another couple of little traps in, but I'll probably put them in the hallway coming into it. But I think for now, I'm relatively happy with that. So let's just trap this entranceway as well. I'm going to put a curved one in the ceiling here to catch someone as they come up the ramp, because that'll be behind them and they won't necessarily see it. So what we'll do there is we'll place an impaler on this back wall to catch them on the ramp. And what we're actually going to do with that impaler is we're going to place the blockade rod on it. So what blockade's going to do is make these traps stay out, which means you can't back away from the bombs that are being fired at you from here, making it again particularly dangerous. Now I could go all out in that room and add in some plasma sentinels, etc., but I find that they tend to be a bit overkill in a room like this. So let's look at trapping this hallway here. So we're down by bedrock again, so let's trap the tomb again. This time we're going to do the same trap again, so we're going to do a pitfall drop like this here, and we're going to make sure we're blocking off that entranceway. I'll make sure to come around and remove that item later on if I'm really low on capacity. We're going to place an impaler on the floor with the hollow cube above it. But what we're also going to do, because people will jump into that and drop out, is we're actually going to place one above it. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my impaler above it, and I'm going to remove the one in the trap. So we're kind of reversing what the other trap's doing. The idea here is that they'll see the hollow cube drop and immediately jump, causing them to jump into that one there. And if we place a bolt trap on the ceiling here, that should force them into that area. So that'll be good if someone's trying to run through it really quick. So this room's quite nice. Let's start working our way up this tower. We've got our bolt trap here, but what can we do in this section here? Well, not a huge amount without really changing the structure completely. But what I'd like to do is catch people on their way out. So what can we do here? Well, the first thing we can do is we can start looking at these side walls here. And I want to focus on this wall to the right. The reason being is that this wall here is not going to be seen from the direction that you're travelling in, so you can't kind of see it from the structure from the outside. But also, it's likely going to be something that you're going to just miss as you come in. I'm then going to place a block here and close this in. And what I'm going to do here is place a bomb behind this. And I'm going to put the bomb trap on second wave and the hollow cube on second wave. What this means is that when a player first comes up here, they'll walk past that bedrock cube and it'll seem all fine. But when they come back down, it's going to open up and throw a bomb at them, which will fall down the ramp in the direction that they're moving. I'm also going to place an incinerator here, just to catch people as they back into that room. Or actually, catch people as they run up into that section, sorry. And what else can I do here that's going to be deadly? Well, let's have a look at this entranceway. So the first thing I'm going to do here is this little trap. So this was again for another pitfall trap, just because I do like throwing them in random places just to catch people off guard. Again, we'll pop that in there. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to set up a few more little traps using the hollow cubes, because we can benefit from them here. So let's have a look at this little ramp that comes down here. So we could do something with this little back wall here, but I'm going to look at this area at the bottom. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to place another cube underneath to block that area in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because this is kind of a solid area here, I'm going to put another block here so you can't go behind it, so you've got another pitfall. But this time what I'm going to do going to place a bomb dispenser with the hollow cube on top. Because what they'll do is throw bombs up into the room, and if they try and run past it, they should fall over this ledge. Especially if I get one of the dragon's teeth cubes and make it so that they fall in an angle into this section here, falling down to where the tomb is. So that should be quite a fun little gotcha. I'm also going to take this back wall out here, put myself another cube in, and I'm going to put an incinerator with a hollow cube in front of it, giving that hollow cube eagle eye so that you can trigger that little bit further, again, as they come into this section. Now, is there anything that I can do here? Yes, there is. I'm just going to pop an impaler just on the ceiling above it here to catch them out as they go into the section. I think a little bolt trap here would also benefit on the ceiling. Now, I still have quite a lot of capacity left, so let's start looking at those entrance hallways. Is there anything I can do around here? Actually, a bomb trap would work quite well in that ceiling there. And I think a sentry could work quite well here as well. And one there. Okay. So we now have this open room here, which is going to be my second death room. So how can I trap this out? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start utilising some corrosive cubes just to make the shape of this room a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to place these in here. Like this here. Just to kind of give the room some irregularity. So as you can see here, you're going to get this little room here. But what I'm going to do actually, I'm going to leave that one out and place it actually here instead. And I'm going to angle that wall at the far side. And I'm going to use an interesting combination here that I haven't seen many people use that I really enjoy. Is I'm going to take a bolt trap and I'm going to put the Relentless mod on it and the Hunter mod, which means it'll fire out a sort of angle of arrows that will track you throughout this room. And actually, if you're in the room, there's not many directions you can go in where it won't get you, apart from back down the ramp. Which is why an impaler on that wall there is going to be really good. Now, if you go this way, you'll fall into that hole and get caught by the little impaler trap. If you go left, let's put something on that far wall in the form of an incinerator. And we'll use some pistons to make it obvious that there's something down there. Now, we can make this again a bit more interesting by putting the opaque mod on these corrosive cubes. And actually, we can make it even more deadly by adding both opaque and splatter. What this is going to do is cause a splattering of acid onto the floor whenever the cubes are hit by the arrows firing from that trap over there. I'm just going to make sure these have got the harden on them. They haven't, so I just need to go through and do that now. The harden on these. It is worthwhile noting that when you select these, you do need to press F to actually add them on, which is what I hadn't done there. There we go. So we're now at 300 capacity left, but I think we've got a nice little deadly room here. This room here is quite set up, so we've got pretty much all of our main traps in. So can we do anything here to make this bit a bit more deadly? Well, actually, yes, we can, because we can actually add to the ceiling on that corner a bomb trap. Just make sure it's got enough range. It has, yet to catch someone on that corner. So that bomb trap will trigger, and hopefully they'll be too distracted by the sentries. And it will disguise the explosion from the dead man's trigger. I also think a incinerator on the back here is going to be quite useful. Now what about this entranceway? Is there anything that we can do here? Let's have a look. No, I think we're actually quite good here. I think maybe another sentry beam here on that wall. And let's think about what we could do with some guards. There's a new guard that came here from Dreadshore as well. Ravager. I'm going to place one here just to kind of... Again, we're trapping out this corridor. These guys are pretty good in close combat, so I think having them kind of in this hallway is going to be quite good. This room feels quite nice. This room is definitely nice. Maybe we can try and think how's going to be a good way of doing this. We've only got 10 capacity left, actually, so we actually run pretty much out. So let's think, well, we can add a mod to something, or we can add a corrosive cube in. So what would do well from being modded? Well, this room here is quite nice as it is. These incinerators are nice. And we trapped that section down there. This section was really nice as well. I think I'm going to add Relentless or Long Shot to this. Actually, no, they need 15. What else can I do in here? Let's think. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add Blockade to the trap at the bottom of here. That way, unless they destroy the impaler, they'll fall back into it. Blockade is also 15, so actually I'm pretty tied up in terms of what I can create here. So I think we're pretty much done with this outpost in terms of its base structure. So the only thing left to do now is to run through it and see how many times it catches me out. So let's go to the very beginning and hold down test button. Test this from the start as a raider. If I press F, you can see here I'm also using the new Dreadshore suit, the Nautilus. I am going to change my equipment out though and use my Vault Lancer. So that should be a good little structure. So let's go through and start looking at this outpost. Now, I am not the best of raiders. I am primarily a builder. So I'm probably going to die quite a lot here. Let's start working our way through and seeing how these traps trigger. So we've got our bomb dispenser here. Let's have a look at how that triggers. Nicely. It does, however, destroy that one there, so we need to sort that out. Oop, that sentry beam goes around the corner. That's going to be nice. So I need to get rid of that sentry beam. Oh, yes. The incinerator is going to be a good one. I need to just respawn myself. Yeah, once I'm in that corridor, it's going to be really hard to get out of. Okay. So, that setup works. That incinerator is really going to get some value, I think. We then have our piston room. So these guards actually got killed off by the trap, so we need to reposition those guards. Sentry gun there. Sentry gun there. I forgot about the bombs. Again, they're quite good down here. That did trigger off my dead man switch as well. That's fine. That impaler. I completely forgot about that. That's good. So I do need to sort something out with that. And this bolt trap just not triggering. Oh, yes it is. There we go. You can see all that section becomes corrosive. There we go. Get my ammo back. That trap there is quite nice. As mentioned, I'm not a raider, even though I know the section. I'm getting caught out by things. The bomb was dropping there were pretty good. If I backed up there, I'd have been dead. Sentry gun. That's a pretty nice one. Yep, that's working quite well. And then I've got my little trap here, walls, get to the ceiling. That's pretty good as well. So that worked quite well. Okie dokie. Now normally you wouldn't be able to keep respawning like I am, but obviously because I'm the builder I can go through and test this. But yeah, that entranceway room is definitely really good. So let's try this section out here. That impaler is in a really nice place. So the first thing here is the bombs are going to drop. Oh my. Let's see what happens in this room. Yep, that does exactly what I was hoping it would do. Lasers stop me from running through, and the cannon backs are just firing their bombs into this hallway. question is, where are all the cannon bats? Because they are... Oh yeah, they are. There we go. And that is going to be exactly what I want out of it. I'm going to try and do a quick speed run through here. Yes. So you can kind of run through, but if you stop too long, that's how you're going to get you here. I quite like how that works. And up here we have our gem mat. We have our lasers. We have a curved ceiling here that's going to be even more impactful, so let's get that. Got our gem mat, and we're out. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the majority of that base. But I think we can save some capacity near the beginning. So let's go back to the beginning. This room, really happy with. This room here was quite nice, actually, once you got into it. The bombs here, I'm not too convinced with, so I'm going to take those ones out, because they did destroy some of the other traps. I'm also going to take these two guards out here, because they got killed by the lasers. Which gives me back 180 capacity. So, what can I do here? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to sort out what was going on with one of the area sections around here. Let me just drop back to where it was. It was down here, whereby the bomb dispenser trap that was triggering when you kind of went over this section, the bombs were actually falling straight back into the trap, which was no good. So let's change that out and actually place the bomb dispenser in the ceiling. I think that's just going to be that little bit better. So let's put that block here, and then we can block this up from the outside here. Let's put the bomb dispenser in the ceiling. That's just going to be that little bit more effective. I normally like having them in the floor, but just didn't work in that sense. But this one's going to work a lot better, especially if I get some dragon's teeth and start funneling this into the right places. The player does need to go underneath it to trigger it, so I'm going to place that like that. Place that like that. So the player comes down here. That block we can block off completely. They have to walk over here, trigger that, trigger the bombs. That should be a lot better. I don't think it actually needs that. I think we can just get away with a ramp. And what I'm actually going to do as well is I'm going to use a... Do I use my triangle ramp here to disguise that incinerator? I think I might actually do it like that. The incinerator will still trigger through that little block there. And I think actually, because I've got some capacity spare, I think I'm going to place another set of bombs here. But actually, that'll get destroyed by that other bomb trap, so nope, that's not going to work there either. So let's think about what we can do here. I think let's bring this wall a bit further forward to about here, like it was before. Is there anything that we can do here? Let's have a think. Maybe that would be quite interesting. So let's bring the wall further forward to here. So that's kind of funneling someone into this area. Let's place a sentry beam on the roof above it. That. Shouldn't be quite as easy for it to get had by the bombs. And this should bounce into here quite nicely. Especially if we put a little dragon stuff at the bottom here. Like that. That should be much, much nicer. Okay, so that's going to be a bit more deadly. And I've still got a bit of capacity to play with, so let's have a bit more fun with sentry beams. I really like this new trap. It's one of my favourite traps now, alongside my bombs. Now, when you came into this room, that impaler was really good, and the incinerator was really good, but this bolt trap didn't always trigger. I need to bring it further forward, I think. So let's think of where we can put it. Because the problem is, it doesn't trigger until you get to this crossover here. Which means it gets you only when you're kind of leaving this room. So can I reposition that? Can I bring it forward maybe? Let's have a look. So let's have a look at our curved walls. And if I do it there, First of all, it's going to be much easier to see when you come in. It's not actually going to get those trigger rings. What about there like that? The way it was originally. Can I bring it over here maybe? Could I add 2 inches to make it that little bit more deadly? I could. That might be the way to do it, actually. Let's add some of those traps in there. Add in Hunter and Relentless. Both of these. Hunter and Relentless. So now, those two cover that entire section. That, I think, is going to be much, much better. That one, actually, I think isn't going to do as much good. So let's have a look. Yeah, that's going to be considerably better. So let's save a bit of capacity by not having that secondary one. Let's block that wall off here. And let's do something fascinating here. Let's put in an angled wall. Like that. Let's make this ceiling also angled. Like that. That'll stop this from getting blocked by whatever you place here. And let's put another bomb dispenser in. Now you can get through the top there, so let's keep this thematic in with some beams and put a corrosive cube here just to make it stay looking interesting. You can't actually see it from that direction though. What is this up here? Is this a little area that you can get through to? No, it's just a little defect in the build. So let's just plug that gap up. Like that. That is better. That is going to be considerably more dangerous. And you also can't see that trap at all until you get on it, which is really cool. Okay, we only have 50 capacity left, so we are very limited as to what we can do. Let's place another one of those new guards somewhere. I think we have enough for one. Yes, we do. So where can we place this guard? Because I do like this guard a lot. So where can we put him? Well, this area here kind of wrote itself off with the bombs. So this area was pretty good. Maybe we could just have a little sentry guard out on here. Or maybe actually, let's create an ambush. So this is something that you can do that I really enjoy. Is place a guard like way out of vision, outside of your outpost. Actually, I'm going to use a warmonger for this. I think they're just a little bit better for ambushes. Means I'm not using the new guard on this one, but the guard is really, really good. But let's use the warmonger for this. So I'm going to give it a few seconds before I start moving the warmonger. And then I'm going to start moving him around. And I'm going to start taking him right the way around the outside of the base. And I'm going to run the base in reverse with this warmonger. What this is going to do is it's going to basically flank the player as they're running through the base. And I really like doing this. It's really good for catching players out. So by doing this, you're essentially meaning that wherever the player is in the base, they're going to get caught out unless they've taken the side routes off to those tombs. And stand guard. So now we have a nice little ambush, and we've used 4,498 of our 4,500 capacity. And we now have a nice Gothic fortress to make our home in. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this playthrough. As mentioned, my name is Waldosis. If you do like what you see, do make sure to come over and follow me on my different channels. As mentioned, you can find me on twitch.tv/Waldosis, where I do generally villainous content, such as Inscription, such as horror games, such as Meet Your Maker, building these lovely death traps, and also things like Dead by Daylight as well. You can also find me on YouTube doing the more curated videos at youtube.com/WaldosisVT. And you can catch me on things like Twitter, etc. at the usual handle of @Waldosis. But for now, I'm going to leave this here. If you do want to come and run this base, I am going to leave it open for the next few weeks. You can find it by going into the social raid menu and searching for Plant City under the name Waldosis. And if you're looking for social bases, do make sure to go over and check raidme.co.uk for a good set of different bases that you can go and run, submitted by creators in the community. But for now, I've been Wildosis, and I hope you've enjoyed the video.